There are only 5 weeks remaining in the 2021 NFL regular season, which is absolutely crazy to think about how quickly this NFL season has come and gone. But it's about time that I jump into another Dynasty Observations video. So I have 4 Dynasty Observations that I have pulled from this past week 13 of fantasy football to discuss for Dynasty. Some trends are going up, trends are going down. So with that all being said, let's get right into the video. So like I said in the introduction, I have 4 Dynasty Observations that I want to talk about from this past week of football, so we can get set into first down. And let's just not bury the lead here and start with what y'all came for, and that is Javonte Williams. And he could not have had a better debut to his rookie season, or the future of what Javonte Williams could be, than what he did in this past week. I mean, he totaled 178 yards and 1 touchdown on 29 touches, including 9 total targets. And this was his first game not only without Melvin Gordon, but also the first game of the season where he has had more than 60% of the snaps in a single game, which gives us an amazing taste of what is to come for Javonte Williams' future, potentially as early as the remainder of this year or into next year in 2022. And this is really going to be a situation to monitor. Does Denver let Melvin Gordon walk in free agency next year and give the reins completely to Javonte Williams in 2022? In my opinion, and this really hurts to say, I actually do think that Melvin Gordon returns to the Denver Broncos next year on a very team-friendly contract to maintain the consistency with the running back backfield that they currently have and have had all this year. And there's a couple reasons why I believe that. Number one, he should be cheap. I mean, he's going to be a 29-year-old running back entering a market where teams have been showing us that they care less and less about signing aging veterans. I mean, it took basically like 3 injuries for the Baltimore Ravens to sign Devonta Freeman and Le'Veon Bell. Todd Gurley has basically been a cashier at a grocery store for this entire season. So it's not a very good market for a 29-year-old running back. But number 2, the Broncos have basically no running back depth behind Melvin Gordon and Javonte Williams right now. I mean, they have Mike Boone and Demoria Crockett as the only other running backs on the team. So if Melvin Gordon were to leave, they would definitely need to add somebody as a depth spot, and they definitely could do that in the NFL draft with any of their 6 day 3 draft picks in 2022. But I think it would make more sense if they just re-sign Melvin Gordon, because number 3, he knows the system and he actually has been pretty good so far to date in the Denver Broncos backfield. I mean, last year he was basically a 1,000-yard rusher and scored 10 total touchdowns. This year, on a true 50-50 split with Javonte Williams, he's still been really effective in that role and has basically matched Javonte in every single game this season. So I know that it hurts as a dynasty manager of Javonte Williams to think about the potential that Melvin Gordon is going to be back next year. But I think that the good news and a little bit of hope that I can give you guys, if that does actually end up coming to fruition, is I think that the Denver Broncos are going to be smart and they're going to give more of the reins to Javonte Williams next year. And if Melvin Gordon is brought back on a very team-friendly, cheap contract, then that means that he is going to be more of a depth piece, kind of an insurance to Javonte Williams in case of injury, and not so much of the 50-50 split that we are currently seeing right now. And the turning point for that might actually be this past week, because they could see what Javonte Williams can do when he has the backfield by himself. And it was what the Denver Broncos drafted him to do when they traded up in the 2nd round to get him at the top of the 2nd in 2021's draft. And he has some juicy matchups coming up for the remainder of the year. I mean, he's at home against the Detroit Lions this week, against the Cincinnati Bengals, at Las Vegas, and then at the LA Chargers, who are all bottom 10 against running backs in fantasy football this year. So Javonte Williams has a fantastic road ahead of him to have a very strong end to the 2021 season. And that is going to basically just steamroll all of the Javonte Williams hype going into 2022 with or without Melvin Gordon. Moving on into second down and sticking with the running back position, Antonio Gibson has come alive over the last month, averaging 27 touches, over 100 yards, and nearly 1 touchdown per game in his last 4 games. And this is the Antonio Gibson that we expected all season long. And it's unfortunate that it took this long and an injury to JD McKissic for Washington to actually start featuring Antonio Gibson as a workhorse, but it's definitely helped and it's definitely worked for Washington. I mean, they've won each of the last 4 games in that 4-game stretch where Antonio Gibson is being utilized as a workhorse running back. So it makes sense that when you give the best players on your team the ball, that good things are going to happen and you have good opportunities to win the game. But the ultimate hope for Antonio Gibson is that, like the Denver Broncos, Washington has seen what they can do and how they can perform when they give Antonio Gibson the ball. And then also the fact that JD McKissic is an impending unrestricted free agent in 22, very much just like Melvin Gordon. This could be another situation where one running back potentially leaving the team opens up a whole world of possibilities for the running back that we are all excited for on that team. And if McKissic walks, it could be very similar for Antonio Gibson as like what we are seeing from Joe Mixon currently, without Gio Bernard sucking away all those snaps, those third down touches, all that extra stuff that Joe Mixon wasn't getting before with Giovanni Bernard. But now that Giovanni Bernard isn't there, out of just pure necessity, Joe Mixon is getting all of that work. So something similar could happen on Washington if JD McKissic were to leave, happening to Antonio Gibson. And a lot of people were souring really fast on Antonio Gibson throughout the course of the year. I mean, especially in that midseason when he was receiving 8 to 14 touches barely on a game basis, like he was playing for the Philadelphia Eagles. It was just really struggling out here for Antonio Gibson managers. But now, with the really strong finish to the season that we are potentially seeing from Antonio Gibson, along with the fact that McKissic is an impending free agent, we could see Antonio Gibson quickly rise up dynasty draft boards again, like what we saw coming into this year, to the point where he is actually being considered above other running backs ahead of him just because of age or similar production, guys like Ezekiel Elliott, Aaron Jones, and Austin Eckler, and even guys like Alvin Kamara or Dalvin Cook, to the point where Antonio Gibson could be, like Javonte Williams, a borderline top 5 dynasty running back at the end of this year into next spring. Heading on into third down, and listen, I mean, it is getting harder and harder for me to not consider Jaylen Waddle a top 10 dynasty receiver, if not potentially top 5. Every single week, he's just seeing crazy volume. He's producing numbers that would have been considered asinine by a rookie wide receiver before we got spoiled over the 2020 class, or even the couple classes before that, where rookie wide receivers have just started to produce to the point where that's our expectation. Jaylen Waddle has been producing fantastic numbers all year long, and it seems like the community has taken a while to catch up to that point to value Jaylen Waddle properly. I mean, he's on a 16-game pace right now for 140 targets, 105 receptions, 1,100 receiving yards, and 5 touchdowns, and he is currently the wide receiver 10 in fantasy as a rookie. It's even crazier to think about the fact that he isn't even being properly utilized by the Miami Dolphins as a true deep threat like what we saw from him in college. They've been utilizing him much more as an exclusive short yardage guy. I mean, look at his stats right here from Next Gen Stats, and look at his routes run. I mean, I counted how many routes there were run past 15 yards prior to catching the ball, and in these 8 games shown, he has only run 9 routes over 15 yards in these 8 games. 9 routes. This guy has sub 4.3 speed, and the Miami Dolphins are utilizing him as if he is the next Jarvis Landry on this team. And it's only because of the speed and talent that he has is that he's been able to break away even the runs that he has already, which is already so short and far and few in between. Now, don't get me wrong, I love the receptions and the targets that he is receiving. I love the utilization already for fantasy football because in a PPR standpoint, he's averaging 15.5 fantasy points per game. So that's definitely fantastic in my book. I just wish that they would utilize him more to some of the skill sets that he's bringing to the table with his speed and utilizing him as a deep threat, because once they actually get that unlocked, very much like how Will Fuller is utilized or was utilized on the Houston Texans, some of the other receivers like Tyreek Hill and guys like that who have that speed, once that aspect of his game is unlocked, he's going to be taken from this type of a wide receiver where he's just a really good PPR machine to an actual elite stud fantasy weapon. And I am so on board and ready for Jaylen Waddle, and I'm trying to actively go out and buy him anywhere that I can, even for a price that might be considered overpaying right now. I would definitely go out and try to acquire Jaylen Waddle because I don't think that's going to be an overpay in as early as next spring or even next year. So then finally we get into fourth down, and I think I need to end this video on somewhat of a sad note because I feel like I have to talk about my Pittsburgh Steelers and how that team is going to look for fantasy without Ben Roethlisberger potentially after this season. And as a Steelers fan, wait, let me Let me put on my Steelers hat here. As a Steelers fan, I know that we're going to be okay. Our GM is pretty good at drafting on draft day, and if we need a rookie quarterback, that's fine. We can take one. He'll be fantastic, but let's be honest here. I mean, we're getting Aaron Rodgers. We're getting Aaron Rodgers, and we're trading for him after this season. We're going to be fantastic. We're going to be Super Bowl contenders with this offense with Aaron Rodgers, Najee Harris, Deontay Johnson, Chase Claypool, a top 5 defense. It's going to be fantastic for the Pittsburgh Steelers in both the NFL and for fantasy football. Now let me put my DLF hat back on. So now that my DLF hat is back on as a Dynasty analyst, I know that the Steelers are Mason Rudolph.
I'm trash.
Dwayne Haskins.
I'm trash.
They're not it. Trading for Aaron Rodgers or even Russell Wilson, like that's not a Steelers move to make. Not to mention that Big Ben and that defense has done just enough this year to make sure that they don't have a top 15 pick in already a semi-bad quarterback class to choose from. So as Dynasty managers, we knew that the fall of the Pittsburgh Steelers was going to come. Honestly, some people have said that it's already started or it has been happening since 2019. I get that, but this offense has a handful of pieces that we as Dynasty managers really like. I mean, it's a top 5 Dynasty running back currently, 2 top 20 Dynasty wide receivers, a top 10 Dynasty tight end. Like, there are assets on this team that are going to be there for the next few years that we really want on our Dynasty and fantasy teams. But without Big Ben, that just puts a whole shroud of like just grayness that we don't really know what is going to happen on this team. The only thing that gives me a shred of hope for the future of the Pittsburgh Steelers from a fantasy perspective is how bad Big Ben has actually been this year. I mean, on a 16-game paces, he's pacing for barely 4,000 yards and only 23 total passing touchdowns. But with all of that, Najee Harris is currently a top 5 running back. Deontay Johnson is a top 10 wide receiver right now. Pat Freiermuth is a tight end 1 as well. And the only one really having a problem right now is Chase Claypool. But even on a points per game basis, he's still a wide receiver 3. So he's still serviceable for you for fantasy football as a wide receiver 3 or flex player. So all of those players are still getting theirs for fantasy with how bad Big Ben has been this year. So it gives me hope that whoever that the Steelers have at quarterback next year, except for Mason Rudolph,
I'm trash,
and Dwayne Haskins,
I'm trash,
that they should at least match what Big Ben has been able to do all this year entirely, including a rookie like Kenny Pitt or Matt Corral. And even if it's just the sweet dream that I have every single night that it's Aaron Rodgers, like I just feel like whoever is the next quarterback, the baseline set by Big Ben should be fine considering how fine and good for fantasy the weapons are on this Steelers team have been this whole entire year. So with all that being said, it should allow for some consistency for these Steelers weapons for fantasy football and allow them to continue contributing as great fantasy options for our Dynasty rosters moving forward without Ben Roethlisberger. So those are my 4 Dynasty observations that I wanted to highlight this year. And if you would like to see more observations or talk about the entire slate of week 13 from a Dynasty perspective, you can click on this video and watch that video. And with that all being said, guys, thank you all so much for watching. We'll catch y'all later.